Okay, let's talk about violence. Now, I'm all for dark humor, and I've laughed at a 9/11 joke or two, but what I'm about to talk about seems to go beyond dark humor. After the election, I started getting posts that were, at best, "we can't get along" kind of posts, and at worst, they were calling for direct violence. I hadn't followed or even interacted with most of these accounts or pages. It almost seemed like social media was trying to radicalize me to violence. It's kind of funny that most of these posts didn't even have the balls to keep the comments on. I don't know what would motivate an individual to post all of these reasons for the FBI to suspect you of violence, but go off, Queen. This seems to be happening in response to the election, and it seems that there's some sort of conflation of the average Trump supporter or conservative with all these horrible, unmentionable things. I have a hard belief system that violence can only morally be used in a direct response to immediate threat of bodily harm. Self-defense. This principle is why I think the government should never have the ability to hand out the death penalty, and it's why I'm very critical of police when they use excessive force. If I think these institutions shouldn't wield that sort of power, the power over life and death, then I sure as hell think that individuals should not be able to. This was all brought to a point with the shooting of Brian Thompson, the United Healthcare CEO. The details of the motivation are not 100% certain at this time, as I've seen different reporting. However, the narrative seems to be that the little guy was punching up. After all, United Healthcare's prior authorization denial rate had been 8%. Then Brian became the CEO in 2021, and by 2022 the rate of denial had increased to 22.7%, according to Wikipedia. People online seem to have the vibe that since the company denies claims and people die, Brian had it coming. Even if you convince me that Brian is Gilbert Huff from The Incredibles.
I don't know about their coverage, Bob. Don't tell me about their coverage. Tell me how you're keeping Insuricare in the black. Tell me how that's possible with you writing checks to every Harry Hardluck and Sally sob story that gives you a phone call.
I would, on principle, say that him dying is bad. It's bad and unproductive. Violence doesn't drive support for your cause. I mean, just look at the declining support for BLM after the protests were labeled violent. And besides, the death is not motivating the other executives to consider how to change policies. No, they're doubling security and moving away from the public eye, probably to an island where they don't have to look at the pores. Whoever got his job is probably happy he died. And also, do you think the United Healthcare's prior authorization denial rate will improve? Hell, the company might stop reporting that rate entirely if y'all keep this up. Basically what this death did, it encouraged the company to be less transparent. The corruption, of course, will flourish in the darkness. You know what would have been more effective? An ad campaign. Maybe one showing a sick baby, and the mother's trying to get him to stop coughing and crying, and the narrator will say, "With United Health, you'll never need to make those hard decisions alone." Then an executive will walk into frame, and then take the baby as the mother begins to cry. The narrator will then say, "We'll make those decisions for you." Then the statistic of the prior authorization denial rate will be put on screen. Maybe the denial rate, being more publicized, would prioritize change and ensure that those two boys would spend Christmas morning with their dad rather than spending it in mourning. Yes, we need to force change, but we can't destroy the whole system. Sure, only 80% of people get their care covered, but if all the insurance companies collapse, at least temporarily, that number would drop to 0. Man, why did this even become such a big thing? Oh, you guys are a bunch of Ted Bundy girlies. Ew.